All right, we're still on section 6.4. Our last video we talked about rectangles. Now we're going to talk about a rhombus. All right, just like with a rectangle, a rhombus is a special parallelogram. So just to reiterate again, that means a rhombus has every single trait of a parallelogram. So the opposite sides are parallel. The opposite sides are also congruent. Opposite angles are congruent. And the diagonals bisect each other. All right, so they have all those traits plus their own unique ones. All right, so the first thing is the definition of a rhombus is that it is a parallelogram, that's why it has all the traits, that has 4 congruent sides. So that's all we know about, or that's the definition about a rhombus, is that it has 4 congruent sides. All right, so if we get a figure, it's 4 congruent sides, and it doesn't tell us anything about the angles at all, and we know it's a parallelogram, then we know it's a rhombus. All right, so a rhombus is a parallelogram with 4 congruent sides. All right, some of the other traits that they have is that our diagonals are perpendicular. So the diagonals, where they intersect, they will be equal to 90 degrees. So we can go ahead and we can draw these boxes here to say that those angles are perpendicular. All right, so not only are the diagonals perpendicular, but the diagonals bisect each angle that they intersect. So that means that this angle 2 is congruent to this angle 1, that angle 5 is congruent to angle 6. And since it's a parallelogram and opposite angles are congruent, that means that angle 1 and angle 6 are congruent as well. And angle 2 and angle 5 are congruent. All right, so all 4 of those angles are actually the same measurement. And the same thing with the other one here. Since these 2 are congruent, the opposite angles, and we're bisecting it, that means that these angles are actually congruent as well. All right, so 3 and 4 are congruent because we're bisecting the angle. 7 and 8 are congruent because we're bisecting the angle. But then it also means that 3 and 8 are congruent and 4 and 7 are congruent as well. All right, so all the blue angles are congruent and all the red angles are congruent. So a rhombus has every trait of a parallelogram plus all of its sides are congruent. And then once we know it's a rhombus, then we know the diagonals are perpendicular, and then we know that the opposite angles bisect each other, or that the diagonals bisect the angles. All right, so now let's go ahead and do a problem. So we want to solve for each of the angle measurements. So we want to solve for the measurement of angle 1, the measurement of angle 2, measurement of angle 3, and the measurement of angle 4. All right, the first one that we can solve here that is really easy, actually there's a couple that are really easy without doing any work, is we know that it tells us rhombus ABCD. So once they tell us it's a rhombus, we know that it's a parallelogram, and we know that its diagonals are perpendicular. So since angle 1 is this angle here where our diagonals intersect, that means that angle 1 has to be 90 degrees. All right, no work that's needed for that one. We just had to remember that's perpendicular, and that's it. All right, same thing with angle 3. We know 3, 2, and 58. We know that angle B and angle D are congruent because a rhombus is a parallelogram and opposite angles are congruent. And then we know that a rhombus bisects them. And we know that all of these angles here are all congruent. So I know that angle 3 and angle 2 are both also 58 degrees. All right, and then the last one that we have to solve for is angle 4. Well, here we have a triangle in which angle 1 is 90, angle 3 is 58. So I know 90 plus 58 plus the measure of angle 4 is equal to 180 degrees because we have a triangle. Well, 90 plus 58 is going to be 148 plus the measurement of angle 4 is equal to 180. We'll subtract over 148. And that means the measurement of angle 4 is equal to 32 degrees. All right, so we know that 4 is 32 degrees. All right, really easy, really simple with that one. But that's it for this video. That's it for a rhombus. All right, the last video for this section is going to be a square.